Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Johnson. And before I dive into my project, I'm going to show you a visual of what I'm trying to achieve and why this is important. So it's commonly thought that people with dyslexia can't read. Truth is, we all see the same thing. We just read it all differently, which can be hard for those to understand who don't have dyslexia because they don't experience this the same way dyslexics do. So that's where my project comes in. After a large amount of research and my own experience of having dyslexia, I created Dysoptic, which is a dyslexia awareness toolkit. The goal of this is to provide a visual way to understand dyslexia. And this is important because research tends to be huge amounts of text-based information. There are large amounts of books and documents that are out there that are all text-heavy, but are minimal to no visuals. And that's a problem for those who are visual learners and people who have dyslexia, because sometimes, depending on the person, a large amount of text can be intimidating for those who are trying to read and end up not reading this large amount of text. So the goal of my project is to create this visual way of learning, targeting parents, homeschooling families, and educators. Now, actually getting into my project, this is the mark I created. I wanted it to represent both the letters B and D, since these are some of the most common flipped letters when having dyslexia. And I animated showing the versions of it shifting from the B to the D, but having my still be the middle of it. Oops. So getting into the actual branding, the color palette I chose is blue because in color theory, oftentimes blue represents trust, and I want both educators and families to be able to trust the content I'm creating, as well as I wanted to design a pattern that's based off my mark that I'll be using throughout my systems. So let's go ahead and get started into the actual content of the toolkit. So I did create a zine, and yes, this is very much text-based, but the point of this is to have a simple understanding of what dyslexia is, the history of it, and why it's not a disability as some people like to claim it to be. And moving forward, to help promote the toolkit, I created a poster that will be hung up in schools and classrooms. The idea of this is to help promote dyslexia as a positive thing versus a negative, because sometimes dyslexia can be considered a negative thing, when in reality it's actually more of a positive. But let's get more into the interesting things, which is the visual way of how I'm trying to show this. So I created 4 different animation visual worksheets. They're supposed to go over and demonstrate different types of dyslexia. Every person with dyslexia experiences this differently. So I create animations that broadly show these different types to help give a general understanding of what they're experiencing. So how this works is that at the top, there's an indication of the type of dyslexia. In the middle is the animation that's actually visualizing what's happening. And in the bottom is a description of the form of dyslexia. So it talks about kind of the definition of it and trying to explain what the animation is showing through text. So we're going to start off with phonological dyslexia, which in short is trouble decoding or assessing words based on their sounds. There's a struggle to connect the connection between the sound and the letter symbols that sound makes. So the idea behind this is that the letter F, the sound that makes can be portrayed with 3 different types of forms, which is the letter F, PH, and GH. I used photograph because the word photograph uses the F sound twice, but it is spelled with the PH. And the point of this was to have a kind of like a jackpot slot. So the different letter combinations are sliding in and out until they finally hit the correct letter form of how you correctly spell it. Next is rapid naming dyslexia, which is trouble naming letters, numbers, and colors off fast. Another big effect of this is the processing speed. When reading fast, it's common to forget things you read or skip over words. This often leads to rereading to try to understand or rereading at a much lower pace to try understanding what you just missed or read. So I tried to replicate this by having a small paragraph where certain letters and phrases will either disappear or quickly or not even load. to help represent the idea of skipping over or missing something. And at the very end, it comes back so you can read what you missed. Next is surface level dyslexia. This is pretty close to phonological dyslexia, but the difference is being that there's a struggle recognizing the word as a whole. The pronunciation rules are really relied on trying to sound out the words, and struggle when words don't follow these rules. And they also tend to break words into syllables. So what I did was I took the word beautiful, and for the longest time, I considered beautiful being 4 syllables instead of 3, which is why I moved the U out to be a whole new syllable. And I replaced all of the E sounds with the double E because when I was growing up, one of the first pronunciation rules I learned was that the double E makes the E sounds. And so when it switches to the double E's, it realizes that there's too many E's and that's not how it's spelled correctly. So full gets pushed out of the way, and until it's spelled correctly, it'll come back and form the correct word and spelling. And then the last one is letter form dyslexia, or letter reversal dyslexia. This is the most common trait thought of when you think about dyslexia. This is reversing letters, numbers, and words when reading. So I chose the letters B, P, Q, and D, which are some of the most common due to the being almost the exact same shape. It's just where the little circle is located on these letters. But with all this in mind, the point of Dysoptic is that it helps fill in the missing gap of not having a visual understanding of what dyslexia is. Thank you.
All right, great job, Brandon. Really nice work. All right, so Caitlin and Brandon, if you want to hop back on, I'll turn me on too. Here we go. So we got a couple of questions in the comments from YouTube, which is great. Yeah, nice. All right, and then there's a comment here for you, Brandon. It's from Casey. It says, I think your animations are really successful when it comes to showcasing what dyslexia is like. And part of what I think is really valuable about that is what you're doing is trying to share with someone else how a different person perceives the world, and the translation of that perception is quite a challenge. How did you decide on the ones that you end up making the animations for?
Yes, so the few that I made for as of right now are the ones I actually relate to and experience a lot of. It's something I've struggled with most of my life, and I've just like, it's something that I'm just kind of used to and I understand. So being able to do the research and like getting a full grasp of the definition has helped me then go into how I read things or how like it affects me, and I'm able to, because I can visually see it myself, like I can do my best to try to recreate that in a way for people to understand.
Nice. Yeah, and so that like that level of research and investigation, I think really comes through in those animations where you had to have a really clear understanding of what they were, and even the ability, which is a really strong characteristic of a designer, the ability to move outside of their own perception to be able to understand something, to then make something that communicates to somebody else. So I think that worked really well really well in yours, Brandon, and I think that also translates to yours, Caitlin, where you are working to help people understand different perspectives. You're helping people understand like the value of diversity and the need for diversity in design, but also the specific sort of characteristics, interests, passions of the people that you interviewed. So nice. Yeah, there are several compliments in here to the quality of the animation and the way that you work through. So Brandon, did you have any were there any like specific moments or anything that you were really focused on as you made those, in terms of like the thing that you were hoping would be like a takeaway from your program for either a person who was implementing it or a person who was learning from it?
Yeah, so I would really try focusing on making sure I'm actually achieving what I'm trying to show. And I would do that by, I would communicate with some of my design friends who aren't dyslexic, be like, hey, I'm trying to do this. What do you think of this animation? Or I'll show my family and I'll be like, hey, what do you think? And like, does this come across how it's supposed to be. So I was really trying to like get others' opinions who aren't dyslexic, because I want them. They're the main audience, is trying to get them to understand what it is. So I like really try focusing on that.
Nice. And I think that came through in your printed work as well. Like seeing the image of the zine where you had very intentionally flipped like a D and a B, where you are making a printed material with the, like, what's the right way to say this? You're intentionally making it with mistakes so that somebody who isn't, doesn't have that version or that portion of dyslexia is then experiencing it. And again, you're not just like telling someone about it, you're actually like demonstrating it through their experience. And I think that as a communication tactic is really valuable. Yeah, and I think that accessibility question is a really incredibly valuable one, and I think that's one that you're both addressing. Is how do you make, how do you make information more accessible? How do you make opportunities more accessible? How do you make sure that there's sort of as many processes in place as possible to, sort of help as many people as possible, whether it's through communication or through cool. Let's see. Oh, there's another one here. This is from Renee, and this is from Renee Mains. She is saying the world needs more designers who care about accessibility, and then there are 3 applause emojis. So yeah, definite kudos on that. What do you think was like one of the biggest, either like maybe struggle is too strong of a word, but as you were sort of getting into the thick of your process, what was either one of you, like what was one of the kind of bigger hurdles that you found yourself wrestling with when you were kind of deciding on this topic and making those sort of first important steps?
For me, it was trying to figure out the like subclasses of dyslexia, because I was trying to do a whole bunch of different research of what the different types are. And I found one article from a professional who talked about how he practices in like diagnosing people, and how a lot of the research like fields that are out there contradict themselves, and that like they're finding different things what other people are. So there really is no subcategory of dyslexia. So trying to like narrow down what are the like kind of official types of dyslexia there are, and trying to like find the similar things to try really animating and learn about was a little bit difficult for me.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, and then sort of one of the other things that both of your topics have me thinking about, and both of your answers have me thinking about, is this idea of empathy and the role that designers play, not just in communication and promotion and distribution of information, but really in like being empathetic towards a variety of different sort of audiences and means and intention. So I don't do either of you have any thoughts on how like the role that empathy played in how you started to wrap this up as you sort of get towards this very final stage of your student career?
I guess for my case and my project, it's definitely showing something that people might not really truly understand if they don't have it, and trying to emphasize this type of this type of thing people live with, that can be very much misunderstood, or like just not really known about, because no one, either they didn't know much about it beforehand, or just they don't have it, so they don't know what it's like to really experience this, or what it's like to live with, because we live with it our whole lives. It's not something that can be cured or just goes away.
Mhm. Yeah, oh, that's a great point. So another question came in from YouTube, and I think this is for Brandon, but I think you could both answer it. And it says, ideally, where would you like to see your project applied in the world?
Hmm.
That is a good one. I would say somewhere in like a school program, for sure, starting to implement that and really teaching educators and students about like more about dyslexia, but also those who are really wanting to switch to homeschooling, and being able for a resource online for those parents who want to be able to educate their kids who may have dyslexia and they don't understand themselves how
Hmm.
this dyslexia works, or like how it really affects their child. So giving them that insight can really help them then transition to a homeschooling situation.
Yeah, and resources for homeschooling have suddenly become incredibly important, and there's, you know, for the, you know, for some amount of foreseeable future, going to be potentially quite valuable. And this could really help people who sort of function outside of the, um, you know, that sort of like standard A to B to C structure. Excellent. There's a comment for you, Brandon, and it says, this is from Brian, and it says, I'm sure Decoding Dyslexia Iowa, which is a volunteer group that advocates for kids with dyslexia, would love to hear about your project. So that's a good, that could be a good resource. Maybe we could figure out if there's a way to reach out to them, or if the commenter has a connection. And then the other one is a compliment. This is from Professor Sherry. It says, I'm impressed that even with dyslexia, you tackle very text-heavy projects and do them well, which serves as a good model to inspire others. So good job being out there and inspiring people to sort of work through and push forward. It's really great. So that brings us to the end of the comments and the questions. So I think with that, thank you both for your really thoughtful and thought-provoking projects. You did a fantastic job of explaining them, but also I want to commend you on how resilient you were through the process to figure out like how things needed to change given the sort of condition that we're all figuring out and dealing with. And you did a really nice job of taking this important work and moving it into a space where people can still continue to experience it. So thanks for that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me and letting me chat with you about it for a bit here. For everybody tuning in, our next panel is at 5 o'clock. So in about 20 minutes, it'll be right on the same channel. And that panel is on social design. It's social design 2 of 2. And so that'll be very exciting. Also, you can check out isugd.com, and all the seniors will have their capstone projects posted on isugd.com/2020 senior show. So you can check out the entire senior show there. Thanks again to Caitlin and Brandon. Thanks to all of the commenters on YouTube and in Zoom. Really appreciate you guys, and hopefully I'll see you again in just a few short minutes.